Hey everybody, Spencer here, doing a quick little introduction to this episode. So I got a chance to talk to Will for a little over an hour and a half, and it was a really great talk, but obviously you will notice the audio quality is not like we usually do. For technical reasons, this had to basically just be me recording a phone call. The audio is as touched up as I can kind of do and is more than listenable. It's just going to sound a little bit more like a radio show. It's still a great conversation if you enjoy things like physical game production, learning about making RPGs, or just indie game development in general. I hope you all enjoy the show nonetheless, but I wanted to actually start the show with a shout out to all of the SMTN executive producers and Patreon people at any level. Remember, if you go to patreon.com/SMTN, you can help keep this show going every week. But the $5 and up tier are the executive producers, so I want to give an extra big shout out to Jagingus, Carlos, Cross Renrin, Donald, Gorosero, Jazzy Jefferson, K-Horse, Kashika, Patrick Dissart, Philip Meyer, C-Show, Solaire, Cameron Sharp, and all of the other dollar and up patrons. Thank you all so much for helping this show be a thing every week, and thank you all for listening. So even if you're a patron or not, I appreciate you either way, and enjoy the show. Bye, everybody. How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network, link 271. I would be lying if I said this was our first off-the-phone podcast we'd ever done before, but after 10 years, this will not be our first, but a rare actually recorded on the phone episode of the podcast. I'm here with special guest from Squire Games, Will. How are you doing today, Will?
Hey, doing great. How about you?
I am thankfully not sweating my butt off in the middle of summer on a hot but not too hot Sunday. I don't know how your neck of the woods are temperature-wise, but how are you doing today?
Oh, man, it's always swinging all over the place. Michigan this time of year is just like... Well, a few weeks back, I was working the first batch of orders, and it was snowing. And then just a couple weeks later, it's, 80 plus.
It's been so bipolar, and I forgot, yeah, especially over there, like in that part of the East Coast, it's been so bipolar of like snowing and 90 just within a month span of each other.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
You know, I didn't even plan on making this my first question. I promise we will get into who the heck you and what you do are. I have a weird dev question that when you mentioned Michigan, this came up. Why are so many... I feel like I know a weirdly high amount of devs in the state of Michigan compared to almost every other state. Of like...
really?
It's so weird. You have like, yeah, just like people all like know, be like, oh, I was from Michigan, or I started in Michigan, or I'm still there. Because like, does it feel like there's a lot of indie devs up there, or am I just weirdly lucky and run into them?
I don't know. I don't know very many. But I could guess that it kind of correlates with the crappy weather and trying to hide inside a little bit differently, a little bit more than other areas, especially when the temperature's swinging all over the place. Mm-hmm. So you want that climate control if you've got it.
I definitely.
I don't know.
That is okay. It's one of those funny things of like me myself have somehow never graced the state, but yeah, I just get one of those things of like, oh, that's a game dev from there, that's a game dev from there. Because it's funny, I've he's no longer still there. He's now like Limited Run and stuff, but I am constantly nagging Joe from Limited Run, who used to be M7 Games. They were up in Michigan for like ever ago, and it was one of those funny things of like, okay, I mean, hey. Indie dev's got to be somewhere. Michigan just ends up being the one place that keeps popping up for me. But enough about all the Michigan love for all the Michigan listeners out there.
Yeah, I don't really want to.
Who the heck? Yeah, who the heck are you? And what the heck is Squire Games?
Yeah, I'm just some rando. I'm just an NPC trying his best to convince everyone that he could be a hero for a day. You know what I mean?
I mean, you've already got a lot more higher credentials than most people out there. I at the very least from 2022, I feel like is probably your most talked about year for the company, at least in terms of, hey, that 3DS is shutting down, and hey, that's the final physical release. What do you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. So. All right. I started in music. That was my big thing. I grew up on Super Nintendo. I always loved the music, especially from JRPGs. And so I dreamed of making music in that style. Like, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger. I I had that music on loop in my head as a kid and into my adult years. So at one point about 10 years ago, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. I've been working in tech for a while, and I just started doing nights and weekends. I'd write some music and put out my first album. It was lots of fun, but I kept kind of wanting more. So the way that it progressed was, the music was designed to sound. The music I was composing was designed to sound just like, a new chapter of a Super Nintendo game, like Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger. And so there wasn't a great way to really tie that in, show it off in that way, outside of, say, a ROM hack, which is not the most accessible way to share music. Hey, get this semi-illegal thing and do this process of patching this other thing into your game, and then everyone's still with me so far, right? Like, it's not easy to share your game or your music, your content through a ROM hack, right? So I figured, why don't I make a little website that looks like a Super Nintendo game, and then people can hear my music in that context. And then it'll be like, oh, I get it. This music fits perfectly with this Super Nintendo gameplay, right? Mm-hmm. So, so that's how I started with music, and then I started making a web-based game engine that's like a Super Nintendo game engine that runs in browser. And then the next step, I'm like fast forwarding by many years with each of these steps, trivializing all the pain and effort. But yeah, then after the web engine, that was a lot of fun. I was like, you know what, I should eventually get on a console. And of course, my pick is going to be Nintendo. I just want to work with Nintendo. Childhood dream stuff. So last year, I was able to sort of really begin that for realsies. I started talking to Nintendo a few years back, but with COVID and everything, it just got really screwed up. All the timelines got screwed up. So I was pretty late to the party, getting to work with Nintendo, but it was so much fun. So now we're sort of caught up. This year was my first release with Nintendo, but I've been doing a bunch of this creative stuff, writing music and making games for about 10 years, a little over 10 years. But the thing is, it feels like I'm new to the scene, because in this latest push working with Nintendo, it's a different audience, right? Like, I have this fan game sphere that I've reached into a little bit with some of my freeware stuff, like the Final Fantasy style stuff. But it's a totally new audience now. It's like, hey, 3DS owners, I got this thing that I made. What are we going to do? Should we check it out? Is this a good idea? Hey, guys, you may not have heard of me, but here's this thing.
I just gotta say, I'm glad. I feel like, especially this was a lot more popular back in the Kickstarter days. I'm glad you at least landed on the 3DS, because I felt so bad whenever I would see indie devs being like, guys, just for you, the hardcore Nintendo fans, we're going to do a Wii U version, which just always meant there will be no sales. Nobody's going to buy it. Like, negative sales if possible. But at least, like, 3DS, especially now, is one of those things where it's really dried up a lot for releases, and especially for something like even an RPG. I feel like you kind of hit at just the right time with Fragrant Story of it. Like, you couldn't just throw any game on a 3DS cart and be like, here you go, guys, go buy it. Like, I was looking over the last week or so at the last year of 3DS eShop releases. And let me tell you, if you've ever complained about the titles coming out every day on the Switch, people should head on over to that 3DS and Wii U eShop. That's a whole different market, everybody. It makes itch look like makes itch look like Summer of Arcade.
Yeah.
So, but it's just been one of those funny things of like, and it's not even like a disparaging thing for the games. It's just clearly it's like, hey, it's to like make a release even happen on Nintendo is just a lot harder of a thing, because like something you probably never had to deal with before. Fragrant was like, hey, get your thing ESRB rated. That ain't free. That ain't easy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you know about that. I had not known about that. I went into the ESRB thing thinking like, well, this will be fine. But no, it's fine for everyone else. If you want to do a physical card, it's not fine. You can't just walk in and self-serve and walk out with your ice cream cone from the vending machine. No, that's for digital releases. They have a lovely vending machine of little ice cream cone. Why is it an ice cream cone in this analogy? I don't know.
It's summer, it's hot, it's on brand.
Yeah, summer's hot. Thank you. Yeah, somebody's buying into my ridiculous analogy. Yeah, but it's self-serve for digital for the most part. It's really nice. You answer a questionnaire, and you get your rating. And it's sort of honor system, right? But like, if they find out that you have a bunch of unreported blood and gore, then they'll come at you.
If anyone out there ever thinks the ESRB touches even a tenth of the games they play, that'd be hilarious. Yeah, the ESRB's job is basically to hope that you pay them enough money to not touch their game, and you don't lie about what is or is not in it.
Right, yeah. Yeah, actually, it's funny if we'll just go off on the ESRB for a second, because, man, that was so much fun. So I'll back up a second, then I'll hit the ESRB. So, I've been doing this, making music, making games for a while, and there's this dream to get on Nintendo, and it's just me, I have a few, like guest artist, guest voice actor, but the core game, the core engine and everything, the base assets, the sprites, the music, all the base game stuff is just me. And so I'm sitting at my little 3-foot by 5-foot workspace, my little COVID closet desk that I've had since before it was cool in the COVID days. And I'm just like banging out code and stuff. So when I get to these bigger steps of working with Nintendo for realsies and working with ESRB, I had to actually talk to some people. And so I'm like emailing people at ESRB, because for physical, you have to go through the old process. You have to, mail them a copy when you're done. You have to send them a video, all the extra steps, and you have to pay too. But when I'm going through these steps, I'm geeked. I'm like gushing. That I'm trying to like calm myself down. Be a regular businessman. Don't get too excited. They're not excited. Like, everyone calm down. But I can't not be excited when I'm talking to ESRB, because I'm just some bozo. I'm just some idiot trying to make a little mini game into a, you know what I mean? So like,
yeah, well, it's like you know the steps. Like, that's a big part of the checklist, is getting those things up there. It's like, I mean, and I don't know, like, how much more, like, into the weeds. I mean, I would get as much into it as you want, but, like, especially with Nintendo, there's a lot of funny steps you have to go through that other publishers don't really make you go through. It's like, hey, you got to get those, you got to pay for those carts individually, you got to put those in a box, you got to seal those things yourself, you got to send those to a plant. Like, Sony will wrap up and do everything on your end when you want to print a game through them, but, like, with Nintendo, there's a lot more extra steps that go into it, which is then kind of funny, because it can be kind of a double-edged sword of like, wow, it's a lot more work to do, but it's also kind of fun when you're seeing all the pieces come together. Because I'm assuming, like, even just to get to the release a couple of months ago for Fragrant Story, what was that, probably like almost 2 years putting it all together just for like the publishing side of it?
A lot of the pieces that make up like Squire Games as a publishing name are 2+ years in the making. But Fragrant Story pretty much didn't exist 1 year ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was like last summer I started pursuing this full time, and at the time I had clearance for 3DS. I didn't have access to Switch, and we all kind of saw that the 3DS was phasing out, but there were no deadlines yet when I started last summer. And then it was like, August, I think, that I started really, like, coding, getting paperwork ready. And they're like, hey, listen, we got some deadlines, like, in a couple of weeks. So, you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, yeah, all right. How bad could it be? Okay, what do I need to submit by the first deadline in whatever it was, September? And I'm like, you need this, this, this. I'm like, okay, all right, cool, I can do that. But then another month goes by, and there's another deadline. And they're like, we're shutting this down now, where you need to submit these documents. It's like, crap, okay. I guess that's my new full-time job until that's submitted in time. So that type of transaction with me and Nintendo happened a dozen times between August and December. And it was always like kind of a last-minute reveal. Hey, you have a week. It's like, oh crap. And since it's all new territory for me, I had to just, learn as much as I can really quickly. And I always ended up submitting on, like, the last day, almost always, because I had so little, of a heads up. So, yeah, that's... And I'm glad you mentioned Sony. I didn't realize they do so much of the kind of pack-out phases for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that would have been great. Nintendo is really picky about, you got to work through these people. They're kind of approved by us. You got to do it in these ways. They got their whole SOP manual and whatever. You know what I mean? You use this kind of ink and these colors and...
Yeah, it's nice that they have a specific, but yeah, it is one of those funny things of like they have a very specific way that they want things, but it's also like, man, and I mean another thing most people don't know is like, so when a game is made by Microsoft or Sony in America, that's made and printed, everything of that's taken care of in America, whereas with the 3DS, Wii U, and Switch, all of those are made in Japan, and then they're brought over here. So like, even just like the logistics of getting all of that like sort of like it's not like they were just burning a couple of copies and you're going to get them in a couple of months. Like, I know what the timeline is like, even after like COVID and stuff now has been for Switch stuff. Like, was it a long wait for the 3DS games? Like, by the time you finally got like those cart trays and stuff, like, was it a while? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, the original estimate was, for digital titles, the cutoff was March, like end of March or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. But for physical, it was December. It was like mid-late December was the cutoff.
It's always so funny because Sony was the same way with the Vita. That physical cutoff before digital, which you think, I mean, kind of makes sense, but it's one of those weird ones of like, you can't imagine like the two processes were like that different or like that much more difficult for us. So it was always so weird of like those situations where there would be games, and I don't have the physical for Fragrant yet. Is the 1.0 of that version you submitted for physical drastically different from the version that launched a couple weeks ago on the eShop?
Oh man, I wish I could say that. I had like a day one. I've been sitting on a day one patch since a week after the deadline. I was like, I just had to rush to. This was another one of those. Okay, the final deadline is in 1 week. Mm-hmm. And I was like, not even surprised at that point. I'm like, right, I guess we're code complete now. Whoops. So there were some bugs. Nothing too bad. But one of the job abilities doesn't quite work right, and just some minor. They're like the currency rewards for missions is a little bit out of whack, but it's not too bad. But so I had fixed those by the first week of January. I fixed right away because I was in the code. I was ready to go. But I thought I had a couple months left to finish my code. Surprise! So I had a patch ready And I've just been sitting on it because I keep submitting it wrong, or they're just really busy. And 3DS is not exactly the highest priority.
No.
Like, okay, quit reviewing these, the lot check for Switch. You got dozens of highly profitable games, and then you got me with my stupid rushed $4, I just want to be real people game, right? And that's what it is. Is I just wanted to get something out there, and even though I had to rush a lot of it, I did it. I got a game out with Nintendo, and I acted as publisher for my own game. And that's a huge win, even if I didn't get my bug fixes in for a day one patch.
Well, it's honestly, I'm surprised and I'm glad that Nintendo at least is still allowing for patch submissions and stuff, just because that was the one thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way about how Sony handled the PS3 Vita thing. It was like, cool, they're leaving the store open still, and they extended the deadline a little bit, but after that July thing of last year, you couldn't submit anything else in terms of patches. So even if, because I had some developer friends, who were like, hey, I want to do this. I want to keep updating our game. You can't. It's all closed off. So it's at least nice. It sucks that it's been delayed, and I definitely get that frustration of you're just sitting on this. Hey, the game could be better, but I have no ability to make it go any faster. That's really, really frustrating. But at least it will eventually happen, as opposed to it's never going to happen.
Yeah, and I would add to that. Well, okay, small thing first, and then I can't forget to say this. The small thing is. Nintendo, there is a bit of a delay with the ball being in their court, but I'm a little to blame also because I still screw up forms sometimes. Check the wrong checkbox, and then that's going to cost me 6 weeks because they're busy, But I wait so long, and then they're like, sorry, we can't process this because you had a typo in this field. I was like, oh no, 6 weeks for a typo.
The submission struggle is real though. I don't think people could really understand it unless you've had to do the process yourself. It is weirdly meticulous. And you get it because it's you want to make sure you're not sending an update that's going to brick everyone's system and light it on fire. But it is also one of those things where you kind of have to learn by failing what the mistakes are.
Oh yeah, so many failures. Anyway, I wanted to make sure people know that it isn't really Nintendo's fault.
Reggie is sitting on the pad. He doesn't even work at the company. He's waiting. He's like, until I go back to Washington. No one's getting any 3DS patches till Reggie's out of here.
Yeah. No, it's my game specifically. He's like, I detected a whiff of Mother 3 on your game. It's this weird Otosan related. I don't like it. It's Mother 3.
Oh, see, I thought it was because in Chapter 3 there's a reference to the Bigfoot pizza he made, and I thought he thought of that as maybe a slice against him, and I was like, okay, that would make more sense.
Oh yeah. Okay, Reggie aside, the bigger thing I wanted to mention here is for updates for 3DS. Now, I could be mistaken, but it's my understanding from the inner secret channels that people will be able to get an update for the foreseeable future. So you can't buy the game a year from now, but if you find a cartridge of Fragrant Story in your couch 1 year from today, you should be able to pop it into your console and download an update for it. If I have submitted one in time, because I can't keep submitting updates forever. I think I'm going to have a similar deadline to, the closure of purchases on the eShop. But if I have an update sitting out there that comes out later this year, you can get it after the store closes. And a lot of people didn't understand. Nintendo didn't communicate that super clearly. But that's my understanding, is there's no deadline for downloading any updates that make it in.
Yeah, it's like how there's a lot of people who think the Wii shop is still closed and you can't download your stuff. It's like, no, you can still re-download anything you bought on the Wii. I think it's just most people think it's easier once it's closed, your system's nuked. It's worthless. Get rid of all your virtual console or whatever. So yeah, it's thankfully like there's options for you. I do wonder. I'm not sure how patch submission works with physical compared to digital. Did you make your life harder, and do you have to submit 2 patches, one for the physical, one for the digital, or do they all just kind of feed into the same code base?
It's funny, I still don't fully know how it works because I screwed up my first 2 attempts at releasing the patch, but it should be shared. It should be, I submit the patch and it applies to both. But it's sort of, the cart is more of a voluntary, if you're offline.
Gotcha.
You might not even notice that there's an update. But
I have a bajillion other 3DS adjacent questions, but I kind of want to get more into the game. But I at least want to say this because I am 99% sure, not like anyone would actually care. I always thought it was so funny that all of the console manufacturers, NDA publishers, from saying, here's how many copies we have made. Which is always funny because, for whatever reason, I always find it just really interesting how many, like, the minimal is for North American 3DS stuff. And I was at least curious for you, right now, with all the stuff you've sold with Fragrant Story, if people are interested, as of this recording, you can still buy it. Are you like, I'm at the halfway point? Like, where are we at in terms of how many copies are taking up space in your garage?
Oh, it's the majority have sold already, which is crazy to me, because I expected maybe like a few hundred units. I was like, all right, I'm ready to go.
What were you like? I'm gonna pass these on to my children with these 5,500 copies left.
Yeah, I thought I would like sell a few here and there. I'd take some on the road with me. It's a late in life release. I'm not an established name in this market, and I didn't really have any marketing budget, or I didn't do ads, I didn't do marketing, but it just sort of blew up. I guess I didn't realize, end of life 3DS was so hungry for a little little game on a cartridge. But so I wasn't expecting this much demand, and that's why I like on the second day, I was like, day one, wow, this is cool. People are interested. I mean, it's a crappy little... Do they know it's short? I hope they know it's short. I hope I didn't screw that up. And I did a little bit. But then day 2, I'm like, oh, no, they're still buying it. That's a problem. I can't physically... It's just me shipping them.
Are you ready? Are you ready for someone in like maybe 9 or 11 months, whenever they finally get around to getting their copy back? You're gonna find a copy of your game graded by WADA or the PSA or whatever. You're gonna see like some slabbed up version of Fragrant Story for like $9,000 on eBay. It'll be like the final PSA 10 Fragrant Story, all sealed up.
Please don't do that. I don't want my creation to become that.
I always think like grading stuff, I don't get it because I actually play all my physical games. Like, I already don't get sealed collecting, but like when I see them in the slab is a good term because it's like a prison. You're sending whatever is in there to die. Like, no, why would I spend $1,000 on this game that I will look at forever and never be able to open up and play? It was like, I always find that like so interesting. But it's like, hey, your game, whether you want it or not, is now a important piece of the 3DS history and stuff. And I mean, not that there's been many physical 3DS games recently. It's at least interesting of like, I think you picked the perfect release timing. There wasn't a lot really going on in April, especially, and that it's an RPG gives it like that kind of extra bump. Because like even other final 3DS games have not been of much note, even though they're very accomplished games. Like Andros 2 is a pretty good shmup. But shmups are a pretty niche thing, and even looking at like the Atui collection, like that's a really good like collection of a bunch of games by that team. That's a bunch of ports that people can play on other systems and stuff on elsewhere. It's like, hey, this is a game. This is the way you play it. It's an RPG. It's on here. It's got, it's not like it's one of those things where it's like, Your price point was fair. It looked good. It sounded good. It's like what's like even like for the digital, I think, and the physical, you have a very fair price point at $4. Don't have to worry about it too much. Think about it. Jump in. You're good. I mean, hey, going back to the eShop, you're cheaper than Pinball Defender 6 right now. So you've got that going for you. Pinball Defender 6 is he's got the balls for $9.99. You're over here $4 even. So you're in the $34.99 for the physical alone is like, yeah, like if in a weird world this ever went to retail, yeah, that's probably what it would like charge for. And you get it's not even like, because you didn't even do the bare minimum for a physical. You gave it like kind of like the Atlas box treatment of like, here's the hard like outer shell with like the little CD thing in there. Like, it's a nice presentation.
Yeah, I tried to. Somebody compared it to Samus Returns. I guess had a similar like outer carton.
Oh yeah, that was another one that did that.
I think that was like $50.
Nintendo was like cardboard and a sampler CD. 10 more bucks, guys. Crank it up. Let's go.
Yeah, but yeah, I hope that it felt fair. I mean, I try to do everything as low as I can. I'm non-profit. Everything is designed to be not for pursuit of profit or personal enrichment, and we can maybe get back to that in a minute. But before we get too far from this, day one, day two, the demand was not just more than I expected, but more than I can physically accommodate. And I was like on the road, and I like pulled over as I was starting to like extrapolate the numbers in my head. I'm like, well, this is good. It's good, I guess. No, this is bad. Hang on. People are going to be mad. So I pull over, and I like edited in the store on my phone connection, bad connection. And I'm frantically like punching in this notion of batch 2. So it was a last second panic reaction to how much demand there was, and it didn't stop. And so batch 2 is just, I'm shipping them later. Because I can't. I'm just one person.
Oh, yeah. Are you saying that there's not an entire legion of shipping team and personnel waiting in the Squire Games headquarters?
That's right. Yeah. Squire Games is just me, everybody. There's no team.
You are too humble though, because you do a lot. I mean, you are the Hideo Kojima of Fragrant Story, at least in terms of director, producer, voice actor, pixel art, music, sound effect. But like, I looking at all the additional people you had contribute to the game and stuff, from VOs to like music and artwork and stuff. By the way, I don't know like how you don't just like humble brag drop that, be like, oh yeah, no worry, I got Sakamoto-san working on some music for my game. No big deal. I gave him a I went to his Fiverr and he dropped me some music.
Yeah, I rejected his first 3. He's 200 hours in, and it wasn't good enough at $5, and I had made him really work for it. No, yeah, it's wild working with these people, but I'm in a similar to the non-profit bug in my head. I wanted to sort of, my instinct is to go a different way from how a lot of this stuff is handled. So on the name dropping front, I wanted to flip that one around too. I just feel so much gratitude to Sekimoto and Kudo and Gideon Emery, because they inspired me. They gave me all this cool stuff that I carried with me for so many years. I've listened to Sekimoto's music more than any other composer, more than Uematsu.
Really?
More
nice.
Than Mitsuda. Yeah,
you know what? Like, honestly, I love Uematsu, and I love but he does a little too much. He Shovel Knighted himself. Like, he's done a little too many indie games where I'm like, I don't know if it's that hard to get him to do music. Like, I really try. Whereas, like, you're not like seeing because it is just one of those funny things of like, depends on how much you see these people you're used to, of like, oh wow, like he's like, it's one of those things of like, I had a similar thing, funnily enough. Like, I was looking at a local convention and they had like iced tea, not iced tea, they had a Vanilla Ice, and I was like 0% surprised Vanilla Ice would be at a Midwestern collectors themed convention, even though it makes no sense. It was like, you know what, that's okay, that's very on brand. Whereas like, yeah, like Kudo and like Sakamoto and stuff, like people know them from stuff like Vagrant Story and all these like other like 90s and like early 2000 like RPGs and stuff, but they're not like flooding the market. Like they're not like, oh, we've done a bunch of stuff. We've done like other things like that. And also like the nice thing about your kind of like nonprofit thing, I think there are probably games that have done similar things to Fragrant Story. Maybe started a Kickstarter, took like $30,000 to $40,000. 5 years later, never did anything, and you got maybe a demo out of it, which was just kind of the nice surprise of like, hey, it's done. And even if like done in the sense of hey, it's out. It's a product you can buy if you are remotely interested in this and have a 3DS. Where it's that kind of thing of like you treated it like a product and less like a set of goals to try and hit every year or so.
Right. Yeah, and there's so much of that. It's not the creator's fault a lot of times because it's really expensive to do this stuff. Expensive of time and money. And what are you supposed to do? Let it simmer for 10 years until you finally have the thing. And then maybe the platform you intended isn't even a platform anymore. And I had the halfway point of that problem where I tried to make everything beforehand and give people a finished, hey, look, out of nowhere, here's this thing. You don't even have to wait. You can buy it, and it will ship out in like a few weeks. But I didn't perfectly get to execute that because, surprise, there's a deadline, and you need to be code complete tomorrow. Okay, well, it's technically a game, so I'll just patch it. We'll do the, who was it, Cyberpunk? That was the worst of...
I mean, there are a lot more... There's a lot more, like, realistic, like, things to assume it to. Because, yeah, it's not like you load it up and you hit, like, Like, no one's having a Phantom Pain moment of, like, alright, Chapter 3... Oh, okay. It's never coming, I guess. Whereas, like, there's content to do, and I know we'll definitely get to, like, playtime and stuff with it in terms of it all there. But, yeah, it's one of those weird ones where, like, I think, especially for physical, you made it really clear with the unboxing videos I've seen of, like, when you open it up, you lay it out for people. It's like, hey, this isn't everything you're getting here. There's more to come. There's more updates coming. Like, what you have is definitely, like, a product you will play, and obviously everyone's mileage may vary in terms of how you feel about the game, but like there's more to come here, and it's not like you're revving up the DLC store. Like you're not waiting for like the definitive Switch edition in 9 months.
Right, yeah. And another advantage of being non-profit is I can just like dump more content into the game. I can make a veritable free expansion of that's what I'm hoping to do, is add some real meat to it. And it's like, what studio is going to do that unless they think they're going to increase sales? But in my case, I'm probably going to be sold out well before I can fill out the form correctly and get the patch, the big patch out. So it's like, what value does that add? Why are we spending resources on this when there's no more sales? But it's like, I get to do that just because I want to, because I'm nonprofit. I don't care. I'm just paying everything out of pocket, and you know what I mean? So it's freeing in that way that I can just do something cool.
No, yeah, definitely. And it is nice, at least, of like, even though you are like for the most part like a one-man team in terms of like the like PR and like social work stuff for it, you make it very easy to get a hold of you, whether it be like DMs or your Patreon or like updates and stuff like that, where it's not like, hey, where's that mighty number 9 3DS port? We're still, were you canceling it? What's the update? Are we getting any more news for that? Like, you didn't like run off and get like bought by Tencent or something like that. You're there.
Right,
People will know where to track you down unless you decide to be like, all right, time to change my name.
Yeah. I'll tell you what though. I messed up for unboxing. The first handful of units, however many, like most of batch 1. Didn't have the second smaller postcard in it. There's this second smaller postcard that says, hey, this is non-profit. I don't pay myself for this, so like you buying 3 copies of it doesn't make me richer. It doesn't. It's just to cover the astronomical costs. And everything that I do on a small scale costs like double or triple what it would cost Atlas to do whatever.
Oh yeah, and because you're not doing anything in bulk or whatever. You're doing the bare minimum print size for stuff.
Yeah, for everything, and then a lot of it I just straight up couldn't afford. So final assembly is done by me, for example. So I'm busting out the leftover COVID gear, like the PPE stuff. I got gloves and masks, and just treat it like a sterile surgeon's environment or food prep environment. And I'm doing the final assembly on each unit, on top of shipping it out myself. So there's a lot of time suck. And all it takes is a couple things go wrong, and hey everyone, you need to wait another week. Sorry, not really sorry.
But I mean, for probably the most hilariously late question I could have gotten to earlier, but I'm a stupid production fan and I like knowing how the eggs are cooked. For anyone out there who may not be aware of Fragrant Story, what would you kind of say is like the pitch to everyone out there with $4 burning a hole in their pocket?
Oh yeah, okay. So the first adjective in my press release for my game was small. And I don't think that survived the game of telephone of like all of the news articles and things that picked it up. Some of them said, yeah, it's small, but some of them didn't. That got lost in translation. But yeah, it's small. This is a small tribute to Sakimoto and the others. It's a tribute to them. So that's why I'm not name dropping. It's for them. It's a thank you to them. And what form does this cute little thank you game take? Well, it's a tactics light. It's like a small strategy RPG like Final Fantasy Tactics. And if you played any of those old games, you'll feel right at home for this short journey. You move your little troops on a grid, you build a team, and take out enemies in turn-based fashion, moving your little people across the grid. And then at the end of the round, you get some currency that you can spend on upgrades and unlock a couple more missions and stuff. So it's designed to be replayed. It's like a quick hop in, do a little strategy RPG skirmish, and then repeat or do another mission. Grind for some coins if you want. They're called thanks, by the way, the currency.
It's easily like, I think especially because of it doesn't really get bogged down in like explaining its systems more than it has to or other things like that. It's very self-explanatory, whether it's your first SRPG or your 100th or whatever. Like, it doesn't feel like it's holding your hand, but it also doesn't feel like it's dropping you into like Disgaea 9 or whatever. Like, it's very digestible. It's very well fit for the 3DS, which is saying a lot because the 3DS is not my favorite handheld of all time, but I found myself really, really enjoying it of like, hey, this it feels like it's a fit for the system in the ways you don't think of. Like, it's not like, oh, it's using the 3D or it's using both screens or anything crazy like that. It's like, no, it's a good fit for like, I would want to play this on the 3DS over the Switch because it's more of like that form factor thing, even if it was in like I'm not going to get any additional love for the pixels with the OLED screen or anything like that. Like, the 3DS screen, even like whether it be an XL, felt like a perfect fit for me. Actually, here's a weird one. I don't know what you did or what dev kit unit you had. When you were making the game, did you have a specific 3DS unit in mind? Were you like, the 2DS doorstop kids are going to love this game?
On the audience side, not really, but I did target the little cheese wedge doorstop, for like stability for frame rate purposes. I wanted to use the old CPU, so I did a lot of my testing on the cheese wedge.
I would have loved it if you found a way to make some new 3DS, like the little C-stick nub had a function for like you can use it as a second left analog stick for no reason, just be like, because like whenever anyone remembers what the ZL or ZR button in that little C nub are for, I'm always like, now that dev had too much time on their hands.
Yeah, they're not used very often, I guess.
But it's just one of those funny ones of like, especially the 3DS, like, it has a lot of SKUs, but yeah, there is that power difference that is kind of interesting to kind of think about, like how much you do or do not use it. I Well, yeah, I was trying to think, because, yeah, I looked at the credits, and I'm assuming you made the game on a proprietary engine, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know if you knew, part of the journey was last summer this pivot, suspecting that the 3DS was gonna, this was an opportunity that would close up before the game I wanted to do would be finished. So that's Otosan, which is like the long form. That's my freeware RPG. And the characters, the kids from that game are the characters in Fragrant Story, because this was supposed to be a mini game from my actual RPG.
Hence the VR helmets.
Yeah. So the kids from this Earthbound style game go to their arcade, put on some VR helmets, and they jump into Fragrant Story. Well, last summer I switched gears to, turn that mini game into a minimum viable product before everything closes, and I'm glad I did. It ended up being an even shorter runway than I thought I had, so good thing I did that pivot when I did. But prior to that pivot, I actually was looking into Unity, because the 3DS can do Unity, with a catch. If you make your game in Unity, obviously there's some advantages. You don't have to make a whole engine by yourself, but you're stuck on the new Nintendo 3DS.
I was just going to say, you'd be bottle capping. You'd have a double-edged sword of you'd be one of the 10 exclusive new 3DS games, but then also there'd be 100+ million people who couldn't play it.
Right. Yeah, so I ended up, I looked into it, and it just wasn't, it was way too heavy to develop on and to run the game. It was too heavy. I didn't like the frame rate. I didn't like the overhead.
Unity especially, like, I feel like I'm very familiar with Unity, but it's been one of those funny things of I almost never play a game where I'm like, wow, no part of this was held back, because it's one of those things of, it's so multi-purpose, but it always feels like there's like a catch next to it, where it's like, okay, this has to suffer, or the frame rate, or it's really hard to optimize, and it really like stinks like that, because like outside of a couple of cases, like a Ori, or even with like a Soulstorm, it's one of those things of, like, it's great in terms of how flexible it is, but I feel like it always ends up causing more headaches in the end, just out of getting it to run in a way that won't make people complain about it.
Yeah, and it's not just performance. It's like the freedom to implement whatever you want. Like, it doesn't even... The way you make a game in Unity is just weird to me. Not having a code panel be the focus is just weird to me. So it already felt kind of unnatural. Just... I wrote the whole thing in C++, but even that was bizarre to me, because I've worked in C++ before, but this was like really old spec. So like some of the commands you would, or libraries or options that you would come to rely on in modern times, that stuff didn't exist. Maybe you want a certain type of array or storage, and you're like, oh, I'll just do this. No, it doesn't exist. And the reason those options don't exist is because it's like C++ 98. It's like really old code. There was a revision in like 2011 for that language that gave developers a bunch of helpful tools, but that specification came out right after the 3DS was introduced. Mm-hmm. So it's like the 3DS is a 1998 code situation. So I'm like, oh, I'll just use this feature. No, it doesn't exist. Crap. What about this? No. So when I was trying to make this engine for myself last year for Fragrant Story, I had to reinvent the wheel on a bunch of basic stuff. Either that, or I was too dumb to figure out how to use what existed in 1998. But
I mean, I was honestly really impressed with it being a proprietary engine. Was my assumption for the most time of my playing time with it, and then also how smooth it all was, because like even as someone who, like, I played the Vita from its launcher to its last final couple of titles, it was that thing of like, okay, everybody, games will just technically get worse the closer we get to the end of its launch, because it was just those things of like, you'd be getting these games that are like simple 2D games, but because they were like, okay, well, we can't make an engine for every new game we release, so we'll just dump it into Unity and hope that it runs. Like, you'd have these situations of like, how are games looking like they're 20 years old but running worse than games that are like graphically way more impressive, because like, it's just those funny things of like, it was rare when you'd even get like a game made in Game Maker, be like, whoa, Game Maker running in 60 FPS, like, that shouldn't be that graphically impressive, but like, that, those were the standards I was getting myself at. But I was like, hey, like, I was like, wow, Fragrant Story, like, it has really quick load times, autosaves, like, really nice, like, there wasn't like even things like I'm sure was a pain in the ass for you, like, the voice compression wasn't really that like implemented for like the voices or the music, and then the art of like how detailed it was. Like, I hope most people are aware of this, but even if you're not that technically savvy, no matter what your version of the DS you're on, those screens are not the highest resolution. So like, any level of like, hey, let's look at detail and tiny art on this 4-inch screen, there's a high chance of it getting lost there or like compressed.
Yeah, and if you look closely, you can see some jaggies, like when Rhubarb is talking to you. Oh, hello, new recruits. Welcome to my cutscene. You can see little jaggies on his hand and stuff, because I did have to compress it. I made the puppet out of a bunch of little slices to get it to fit onto a sheet. So, you'll notice it most if you really want to see the jaggies. Why am I telling people this? When he fades in and out of the screen, like his arm is made up of two pieces that overlap a little bit, so you can see the overlap when it fades in and out on his elbow or something like that, where you have double the opacity because it's two different layers.
And then now we'll never unsee it.
Yeah, you'll never unsee it. I've cursed you all. I don't even know if it's his elbow, but you get the idea.
There's a lot of different media that I feel like it was really inspired by while either playing it and looking at all the different art and music from it. Just curious, for the cover art, I mean, obviously, you tell me which one it was, but I've kind of been trying to guess in my head. Was it more inspired by like the Saga games, or like what was the kind of inspiration for the art you picked on the cover?
Oh, just straight up Amano, like Final Fantasy stuff.
Okay, yeah, because it was that thing of like trying to be like, was it more because like it was that funny one of like, well, yeah, because I guess they both kind of get thrown into the same camp of like, yeah, it's Final Fantasy Legend for it. So yeah, like the I'm sorry if I am showing my lack of art for it. Who did the cover art?
So that was High Churn, or Gracia. She's like a student of Yoshitaka Amano's art style. She does
Gotcha.
an amazing job in that style. So she made the line art, and then I actually colored it in and used a background from one of the cutscenes, and I tried to just amp it up in Photoshop to be high enough resolution to print, and it looked all right. I shouldn't be talking about that either. I need to stay out of how the sausage is made, because it just rapidly demystify you all and run away screaming.
Hey, I as a even with as limited as amount of time as I get myself for the graphic design work for it, I think the line work was great, but yeah, the coloring and stuff was really good as well. There another one for you. So yeah, with your style of pixel art, because yeah, even kind of comparing it with your other work and like even going to Otosan, did you feel like it was inspired by yourself, like one specific kind of project? Like, how would you have put like your like isometric pixel art? Like what would you say really kind of inspired all the stuff for Fragrant Story?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly it comes from Tactics Ogre and a little bit of Final Fantasy Tactics, but Tactics Ogre was the big one, because it's all supposed to look like Super Nintendo, and Tactics Ogre is, well, it's not super well known. They got a little boost from what the PSP
Hey,
re-release.
let us cling together is probably the best selling. Not that that's saying much, but that's probably the best selling one in the series. That's a really really great tactics game.
Yeah. So I went for that, the original release for Super Nintendo. I went for that art style. And side note, let us cling together. The collector box, I put this little thing in the corner that says, shoot, I shouldn't be saying this if I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like "Let us cling to the shoulders of giants," because it's supposed to be this tribute to the people that inspired me, and like celebrating, sort of passing the collaborative torch forward. It's like, hey, he inspired me, and now I'm working with him, and we're making this nod to his old games, but it's new. There's new stuff. So yeah, that's what that is in the corner. It's a funny reference to the old Tactics Ogre subtitle or whatever.
I as a fellow collector in early, well, I guess not early, but a very big in the 80s and 90s Square fan, I appreciated every element I've seen from the collector's edition for this game. I thought you did a lot of really nice touches in terms of just like all the little aspects and kind of like stuff in there. Was designing the collector's edition for that one more fun, like at the end of the day, than you kind of thought? Or like, because like putting a game together is already like one kind of task, but then making multiple SKUs for yourself like has always got to be like fun but tough.
Oh yeah, I mean, it sort of was making the best of some waiting periods when I couldn't advance my code, and I was, chasing as many threads of physical production as I could. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to prototype some goodies and see if I can actually execute a collector's edition and get the cost down low enough that I can actually do it at break even and have it be, a good enough deal to people. So I was, while waiting on a bunch of stuff, I was prototyping keychains and, acrylic prints and air fresheners, like car air fresheners, and just learning a lot about some of these companies that produce this stuff. Some of them are the same company when you peel away the layers.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to try this company. Wait, you're the same on the address label. What just happened? But you're cheaper. You're competing with yourself. This is weird.
The joys of monopolies.
Yeah, so...
I gotta say, it's never too late. I don't think production for this has ended, and you still have the ability to patch Shin support. Any chance for Fragrant Story amiibos?
Oh, never say never.
Speaking of Shovel Knight, man, how was that the only like indie game that what was dumb enough to want to do amiibo? I was like, when I saw that, I was like, someone else has got to do it. But I mean, that all probably goes back to Animal Crossing scaring and destroying the amiibo market for about 5 years. But it was that thing of like, I was always surprised. Most people probably have no idea the amount of cost and R&D that goes into an amiibo is hilariously high, but it's just one of those things of like, it is kind of like that's got to be one of those, wow, that's a weird thing to see, because like there's never been a like limited print amiibo. Probably mostly to the fact that they have an incredibly crazy high minimum print run required, that it would almost have to go to retail. But it is one of those like funny things of like it's a weird thing that's lasted in terms of backwards compatibility for so many systems that like even though they've definitely died down in popularity, I doubt they'll ever really go away. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could make a rhubarb amiibo, I would love to do that. And it's the kind of crazy thing that an indie or a small studio typically just no way is that feasible. But for me, because I'm crazy and I can just save up donations and personal funds and do a crazy thing, I could actually maybe do it.
And if it all blew up in your face, at the end of the day, you could just cheap out and do an amiibo card and be like, "Here you go, guys. I said amiibo. I didn't say it'd be a figure."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. It's got to be a figure, right? I mean,
I'll say this: Nintendo didn't need to stop at the cereal box. I remember, if you want to go and support you and your stuff on Patreon, nothing's stopping you from putting an amiibo chip in that T-shirt. You could get a Fragrant Story T-shirt amiibo, and if that doesn't get a news story, I don't know what won't.
Oh man, that's a great idea. Where would it be? Like,
yeah. I mean, I'm a child. I'm a child, and I would put it. I would put each shirt has 2 NFC chips in it, one for each where you assume the nipple would be. That way, if you're a righty or a lefty, you're covered.
Oh yeah, wow.
And I mean, you have an instant out. You can just say, "Oh, it's the heart," because no one really goes to the middle of your chest for the heart. You put it over a left or a right. Say, "Oh, it's my heart amiibo."
All right, I'm frantically jotting down this nipple NFC. Got it. It's right on brand for the stupid crap that I put into Fragrant Story. I don't know if you heard about this, but I knew someone who helped me make a coin, a collectible coin that I was going to do for pre-orders, and they couldn't make enough without the price getting it got unusually high at a different break point. So I ended up with fewer coins than I thought I would, but I gave out these coins of the in-game currency. So on one side, it's like a brass brushed, it's a beautiful coin. And I gave these out to the multi-signature collector's edition people. So there's a few of these coins circulating, very few. But on one side of the coin, it has Queen Mango from Fragrant Story, and it says, "In Mango We Trust," and it says 2022 on it. But on the other side, it's a big chocolate ice cream cone emoji. Chocolate ice cream, not ice cream cone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Poop emoji. But that's the currency in the game. They're called stanks, standard ranks. So the coin is 1 standard rank. Get it, rank. And yeah, so that was a lot of fun.
It's awesome. I don't think I've seen anyone get any of those. I'll have to see if I can scrounge. I'm sure someone's posted about it on Twitter. Be like, "What's this stank coin? Is this the new cryptocurrency? It's stank coin."
Yeah, I might do like a fundraiser or something. I need to make sure that people understand. I was going to do this with consoles too. I have a bunch of like 2DSs that I tested with, and 3DSs, and I just want to like sell them for as low as I can. To kind of anti-scalper the market a little bit. It won't help too much, but I want to do something like that. And maybe do a fundraiser with the remaining coins and be like, "Here's a coin, it's stupid, but it's $100. It's like the nonprofit radio tote bag, right? It's
yeah.
like, if you want it and you can support, you get a thing now. So,
was getting Nintendo dev kits for the 3DS last year pretty tough, or were they pretty easy to get a hold of for them? Because like I assume it's either one way or the other. They're either begging you to take them out of the door, or you got to drag them kicking and screaming.
No, they I got mine even before COVID. It was like 2018. I got them, and I was sitting on them for a while. But even shortly after I got mine, I think they were not selling them anymore. So anyone who came in trying to make a 3DS game in like 2019 or 2020 couldn't even get a full dev kit. Maybe you could get one of those little satellite Panda units or something, but even that, they've stopped sales of that quite a while ago, I think.
You brought up an interesting thing about different companies and everything else out there. I was really surprised, not when I saw that this was a thing, that you were actually just doing it yourself. Because I feel like this is one of those things that any of those like limited print companies would have been sniffed, like they would have sniffed it out and been like, "Oh, hey, let's do this. Like let's get some eyes on it." Like, were you ever interested in seeing if anyone else would want to put their name on it and do a distributor deal thing, or was it always one man team, buy it, ship it, get it all done yourself?
Yeah, I kind of have to do it myself. I wasn't interested in offloading any of the publishing or related like production layers, because as whatever relief that would have been at any number of these stages in the past 6 months, total chaos for me. But I had to do it myself because of the nonprofit bent. You know, it's like no one else is gonna be on board for, you can publish it, but you're only going to get 50 cents per unit. You still want this? No, they're not. That's a terrible. Yeah. So at least until I find someone else who's willing to just charitably produce, it's going to be me doing everything.
Gotcha. Oh, I can definitely I can definitely get behind that for it. But I don't know if you put out how many collector's editions you made. Did you ever have a final number on how many of those you had before they all sold out?
Oh yeah, so that and the regular edition are sort of, I'm in hush mode not to be like try to manipulate collector resale.
Oh yeah, yeah. I get. See, I totally get that because like in my dumb brain, I always hear that and I go like, oh yeah, because like I like to know how many of a thing there is for like morbid, like curiosity, like history aspect. But yeah, that is a good point because then there will be that guy with his $10,000 PGA 10 Fragrant Story Collector's Edition. It'll be like 1 of 2,000.
Yeah, I really don't want to mess that up right now, but the real reason I can't give numbers is because of the supply issue. Mm-hmm. Until that's resolved, I just have to shut up about it. But I can say that it's I cleared it with the people that I'm talking to about this, that I can say, quote, it's comparable to a 2-week collection. So it's like it's not huge numbers. It's a small run. The collector's edition is much smaller as a fraction of that. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just a small batch.
Yeah, because you would think at the end of like their life, the companies who like produce these carts would like be like, "Hey, we're gonna lower the minimum number to get more of these done out of here." But like Nintendo, I know for sure didn't, and I know no, Sony's always been pretty flexible with it. But what their original minimum print run requirement was to comparing what it is now, like you'll have games it's like 500. Like, all right, I guess. I don't know what like machine you ran for 30 seconds, but I guess that was all it is. But like with the Nintendo thing about it that I find so interesting is there was interest in Europe, there was interest in North America, like the Western market definitely there was, but like the Wii didn't have this, the Wii U didn't have this, and the 3DS didn't have this. And I thought it was so weird, and I'd be curious what your thoughts on nothing out of Japan. They were not they could have printed games the last 2 years. Nothing came out on 3DS in Japan at all. And it was just so weird of like, there were games, there are companies who do like smaller print runs that are based out of Japan and do work for indie stuff. And it's just so funny of like, do you think it was just there was no nostalgia there in a way that like seemed like it was financially viable? Because what most people don't know about Japan, even Japan's number for their minimum print run is like half of what the West is. So it's even less of a it's less of a financial risk for them. So it's like you think of all these games that like could have been printed there, but I mean, and this almost kind of gets into another one of like I always think it's weird. Although the 3DS and the Wii U do specifically have a thing that do make it incredibly import unfriendly, and I'm sure you had to deal with that headache of how many times did you get people buying it internationally, being like, "Hey, this only works on North American 3DSs."
Well, yeah, zero. Initially, I locked it down because it was NA only, and even within NA for eShop, it was America, like US only. And I'm sure I pissed off a lot of people, but I just couldn't do it any other way. It was so late, and I was already screwing up enough paperwork that I just had to concede on that and be like, okay, what are we set up for right now? Nintendo says you're going to be on the eShop for US only. Any objections? And I'm like, crap. Well, they're going to be mad, but no objections. Yeah, I guess that's how I incorrectly filled it out. So no Canada. Sorry, Canada. Nothing personal.
Oh yeah, because Nintendo separates it even by that. Yeah, because each one is on its own little area like that. That's always a weird one.
So the cart works in Canada and whatever the other, like Brazil, Mexico, a couple others.
Well, you also have the United Arabic English 3DSs. Those like 800 systems out there that like there's a few like English region systems that aren't in America. Those will still work with, but yeah, it's very primarily going to be North America only.
Yeah, and like Singapore too, I think. So the cart will work in all those extended versions of North America, in air quotes. But for eShop, it's just US, which I was so bummed about, and I don't think there's anything that can be done about it anymore. It's just everything's winding down. But yeah.
Did you did you ever have like if it would have been possible, or when I did, like, was there ever a thing of like, oh hey, let's see if I can get like a Japanese language version of it up, or like other like eFix support, anything like that?
Definitely. Yeah, you want to know a weird thing about that is when I looked into it, I'm still not 100% sure that this is a like forever barrier, but it seemed like to be a publisher for myself in the way that I wanted to, I can only do Japanese release if I have like some sort of physical presence in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Or a proxy, right? So
yeah,
since I super don't have that, I couldn't do it. But yeah, I'm really interested in translating into Japanese.
I was trying to think of other ones with that, but yeah, because it seems like to me like one of those things that, at least like in terms of if you could like get it worked out for it, there would be a lot of international kind of support with it. And I mean, listen, we're a long ways away from the 3DS launching. If people really want to play this game on their 3DS, I'm sure there are many ways people out there could find how to do it. So it's not like people are out there being like, please, please, I have no way to give you money. Like you have your Patreon, you have your ways of like donating. Like I do wonder, have you had anyone like Guilt donate you like the $4 or whatever? Be like, hi, I'm in Brazil, I can't buy this game, and I ripped it online. Here you go.
Oh, not in so many words, but I think that has happened. Yeah, and actually, I've directed a number of people to explore custom firmware when they were, curious or even frustrated about the region lockouts. I am quick to tell them, hey, listen, there's other options, and I can help point you in the right direction. I'm sorry that I couldn't do this, but have at it, Just install some custom firmware. That's up to you. It's your system.
As someone who grew up and stuff, kind of doing a lot of ROM hack things, will it be weird if like in a year or something from now you see someone puts a homebrewed version of Fragrant Story on the Vita? Because like that's going to happen eventually.
I would love that. See, it's yet another place where all you have to do is eliminate the profit concern, and then you can just be happy about that, or flattered that someone did that. Like,
do you have a dream port? Like, if any emulating or homebrew people out there, are you like dying for like a GBA port of Fragrant Story? Like, what's the big one?
GBA is so low res.
Hey, that didn't stop Square.
Yeah. I don't know. 3DS was kind of my favorite for weird or low res stuff because it's so close to Super Nintendo resolution that I was able to take a bunch of my assets, UI stuff, some of my 6-engine components, and just drop it in, take my measurements from that. It's the same resolution as Otosan runs in browser. It's like 400 by 224 or whatever it is. So, yeah, I love that. And if it gets the Switch later, it'll be just scaled up like Shovel Knight or whatever. But, 3DS was exactly that for me.
I gotta say,
really
with your Super Nintendo history, I'm almost surprised, like, you've never, or maybe you have looked into it, like, tried to do home carts, or even for, like, your music and stuff, of, like, I've always, like, thought it was so interesting, like, we live in a world now where people will put soundtracks or remixes on actual Super Nintendo cartridges and, like, put them out in, like, sets like that.
Yeah, I did at least, like, a display cartridge for a couple of my first 2 albums. I had a special box set that had just a dummy cartridge. But, yeah, for actual gameplay, I decided to do in-browser for my freeware stuff because it's so much more accessible. And I actually added phone support, too, so you can go in a mobile browser or, a laptop or whatever, and you can play this game. It just comes right up. You don't have to do any patching or run an emulator. You just have whatever, Chrome, Safari, just point your browser at it and it works. So it was a much more accessible way to share my stuff. But I will say, my previous like physical stuff that I did, physical projects for my old albums where I had like a dummy cartridge, Super Nintendo cartridge, those were really, really small batches. That was like a few hundred, and then I'm done. Mm-hmm. So it was no problem to ship them out, but an order of magnitude, and now it takes a full day to ship a small portion of units. It's crazy, the scale of this.
How well accustomed are you with your local post office now? Are they like your best friends?
Oh man, I love them too. Everyone I've dealt with, I feel nothing but gratitude for how dumb I am and how patient they've been. So Nintendo, hats off. You're face palming, I'm sure. Post office, you are face palming. They're like, listen, you can make a batch barcode, man. You don't have to scan 100.
Each individual one. Let me get each one and give them all their own individual receipt for no reason. Let's make it as long as possible.
Yeah, you can do that if you have a system that can print, but I have a primitive system where it takes like hours even just to print that many labels. Again, it's the pains of being small scale, small batch operation.
This would be a great time to be sponsored and put an ad break for Stamps.com. Let me just say.
Oh no! It's another herpes for your like subscriptions to satellite radio and whatever, and our warranties and stuff. It's just another incurable. Yeah, Stamps.com for the last 10 years, and you didn't even know. Why was my rent late? What happened?
Oh, yeah, there you go. I've had the scale collecting a giant dust bunny for 10 years because I shipped out 4,000 games 10 years ago. Oh, yeah, actually, I don't know, had anyone, like, any mom and pop shops reached out to you? They were like, hey, could you do a bulk deal? I want to buy, like, 50 or whatever. Like, people who were like, hey, I run a store. I want to buy these and sell these.
Yeah, that, a few flavors of that happened. So in the U.S., it was a lot of distributors saying, we'll buy them at half price, and then you don't have to worry about working through that many, because surely your margins are something like that anyway. And I'm like, no, actually, that's my cost.
Let's talk about margins, everybody. Let's get.
Yeah. So I'm like, sorry, there's actually no margins because I'm a dumb businessman and the costs were really high. So
Jim Cramer was very disappointed with this run. Let me tell you, he would not recommend this again.
But there were a few people who. So a couple places were like, yeah, that's fine. We just want to put it in a display case. We'll take a handful of copies. And, yeah, I give them like 5% or whatever tiny I can carve out or just eat the loss at that point. But there were a few places in Canada that I was more eager to work with because at that point the savings on shipping is enough that I can be like, let me just cover shipping and get some units out because that market got screwed. I did not intend to lock Canada out of the eShop, so let me get some carts up into Canada that resellers can distribute. So it's a small fraction of the run, but yeah, there's a handful of them in Canada.
I was trying to think of like any of those situations for people being like, yeah, because that's a thing. Like it's always a weird one because like you're expected. So yeah, like in most cases, distributors will be like, "Hey, cut us a deal. We're gonna buy a bunch." But then, like the question that never comes up, or at least I don't know if you asked any of them, were you ever like, "Hey, what are you gonna sell this for?"
I don't want to know. Yeah, I mean, I sort of alluded to that the market could go any which way, and I don't know or care. I don't want to know.
Yeah, because like that's that interesting one of like. I mean, there's never really a fair assumption, but it's kind of like maybe you're gonna charge $5 more, $10 more, you put a gross plastic thing around it to never open it up at $100 more. So like it was like one of those. Do you like? will it be weird, I guess? Like, let's say you're traveling up north, you find some, like, Canadian game shop, and you find there's, like, one copy left of your game. Like, what's that threshold for you? Like, where you don't want to see it over that price, otherwise it'll be weird.
Oh, I just don't want to know when I'm providing a copy to these people. But if I see it in the wild, that's fine. People can make money off each other all they want. I just don't want. There's this sacred thing where I must not make money off of my initial sale, because it makes it like a I don't want to use that word. It makes it better.
Are you in your company? Are you like actually like a registered nonprofit?
No, in Michigan, there's some weird requirements, and
I was gonna say
more than just one person.
Normally, if you want to be a registered nonprofit, it actually makes your life harder. I've found out.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been in the game long enough, and people can see what I'm doing. I'm transparent enough that it's pretty obvious the way I price things.
Well, you are calling from your third Tesla, I think. This is live from the Tesla Cardcast.
Dude, let's talk about this for a second. I'm in my busted little jank little 4-cylinder talking to you right now because my apartment is like small and loud. Unexpectedly, just a lot of noise pollution. And thanks again for being so patient as I tried to rush over and get set up in my car. What a stupid problem to have.
You know what? That's a first. If anything, I now feel more bad because whenever you're done, you're going to return to your sweatshop, I imagine, and then they're going to be like, "You were in your car for 90 minutes. What happened to you?"
Oh my gosh, this is such a great break for me because I've been doing like 16, 20. I even had it was about 30 hours shifts where. Yeah, I'll sprinkle in like a 30-minute break or something and do some stretches. But like, I need to ship units, and it takes a long time to do a final assembly. So I'll just work all through the night and into the next day, 20 hours, and then I'll sleep for like 4 hours, and then I'll immediately resume final assembly and shipping. So that's why these batches are so far out. And that's why when the supply issue happened, it like totally wrecked my production schedule because I was already working greater than full time. I didn't have room to absorb another problem like this. So I said all that to say it's really great to sit down and hang out with Spencer for a little while and not do assembly and pack out and stuff.
Well, I appreciate at least, kind of getting to learn a little bit more about this. I know you probably will not believe me. Even though I've had many jobs that involve, like, packing and shipping and stuff like that for it, I envy you just because I would love to know what that process is like, even though I am sure you are incredibly sick of doing it.
I'm not. I've been so fascinated with all the steps involved, and I would be sick of it except for one thing. The one thing is that it's like this is my baby, this little stupid game with a physical cartridge, childhood dream. So the finished product, especially with how much labor goes into each one, each finished product is just so beautiful to me that I'm still not sick of it. And I have this weird thing where when I have an array of them, like if I have 50 or 100 finished units and it took me 10 hours, whatever, it took a few hours to make this, it just looks really pretty when I'm looking at my
have you done a picture of you've assembled them but you've not put them in the shipping box yet, where you just have these sealed 3DS games?
Yeah, I've been taking little pictures. I don't do socials. I don't post much online. I just hardly engage because I'm so focused on wearing a million hats and just working on stuff. But I do have photos, and eventually I'm going to do sort of a retrospective on some of this production stuff. So when things calm down, fingers crossed, in a little bit, when things calm down enough, I would love to share some photos because it's really cool. It's really pretty.
Will you be left over with like 1,000 extra empty 3DS cases, I wonder?
Okay, am I allowed to say this? I really want to say this.
Well, I was just curious because I know, at least with Xbox and PlayStation, I know this for 100%. Switch, I'm less certain on, but I know with at least with the other two, they will give you an infinite amount of empty cases, but neither company will let you sell them. It's like, we're giving this to you. You can never get rid of it, though. You've got to use them or lose them.
I'm, as far as I know, I'm exempt from anything like that because I didn't even use regular cases. I used resellers, a bulk reseller.
Oh, okay. So you were recycling. Nice.
Yeah, but because I think it was Sega slash Atlas did a huge last minute reprint of like 100,000 units, some ridiculous number.
You know what, man? They did it for like the least requested games, which was the worst part. It's like, guys, we heard you. Sonic Boom getting reprinted. I'm like, oh, come on. It's like,
come on. Yeah, so they bought up a bunch of cases out from under, I not just me, but I think from the schmuck, Andrew Dunos, one or both of us, they just bought out all the official cases in like a huge radius. And so I'm already like late because of various other delays with Japan. And then I find out that there's no cases in my facility. It's like, that's not good. Why'd you sell them to Sega? Didn't you keep any for me? What happened? Why are they gone?
They'll be like, we can cut you a bulk deal, but they're going to have the FIFA sticker on them. You can't take the FIFA sticker off.
I would have still done it. I've made so many concessions. I was like, the whole point is just get it out, get something out, become a publisher. It doesn't matter if everyone hates my game. It's non-profit, so it doesn't matter if I sell any. I don't care. The show must go on.
Are you? Because I'd mentioned it myself. Like, I don't get sealed collecting. Have you been happy with the amount of people who've been actually opening it up and playing it and like talking about it? Because like, I feel like, especially with how much of the work you've been doing, I would hate to just see people be like, I got it, and then it just stays on their shelf.
Yeah, I'm really happy with that. I'm so happy that people have been the overwhelming response that I've seen has been it's been overwhelmingly. I love the care you put into that, and that's exactly what I wanted. It has a scratch and sniff sticker. It has a manual. It's tiny, but it has a manual instead of just
our standards are very low. Tiny is great. That's what we're looking for.
And then, it comes with the soundtrack, CD and digital. So I wanted it to feel really fun. I could have just, in February, taken the poorly shrink-wrapped cartridge in a not even official case and just sell it for $40. I could have done that.
Could have just, you could have really upset people. Just get the really bulky and ugly transparent DS cases that Europe got. Oh, no. Just chunk them in those.
Yeah, but I really wanted to just go the extra mile, and I'm so glad that I could make it feel like you're paying for that instead of just being a collector by pricing the eShop so much lower. I really wanted it to feel like an optional, hey, if you like unboxing an actual thing, then that's going to be a fun experience. And, yeah.
Like, I can relate to nothing less than when I see people who are like, I want to buy a $100 collector's edition, and then I want them to give me a digital download code. And I'm like, then why are you spending the $100? It's like, I get in some cases the convenience for sure, but like, especially when it's like the cartridge stuff, I'm sure when you finally put that cartridge in for the first time, like, nothing was more satisfying than seeing that little, like, Fragrant Story, logo pop up on your 3DS.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't get buying something and keeping it sealed like that unless you're deliberately targeting as an investment. Like, this is going to skyrocket. Well, then it makes sense. But if you just sort of vaguely collect and you keep it sealed, I don't know. At that point, I would rather, I did this for Super Nintendo. I got some of those cheap reproduction outer boxes for Super Nintendo, so I can put it on a shelf And when you're walking past your shelf, it looks exactly the same. It's the repro of Secret of Mana or whatever. It looks exactly the same. And then I'm not taking a playable game and a collectible relic off the market to collect dust on my never be opened, So repros, right?
Yeah,
Why not
no.
just go with repros? That's just my taste.
No, I definitely get that. I do have to say, I wouldn't think I would be saying this about a complaint, but I had one little nick the whole time I was playing it. This is no fault of your own. It's because Nintendo. But man, I would have loved to have clicked that little green logo while playing Fragrant Story and opened up to the Fragrant Story Miiverse community and just be like, what would people, if the Miiverse community was still a thing in 2022, what would these like handful of new last releases, what would those communities be like, Just be like, take the, because it's not like, because people would just be like, oh, just do it on Twitter. It was a different thing, because it'd be like, no, these are people who are weird enough to want to connect to your system's only connected community for this one game, and it'd be kind of fun to be like, what do they think? What are their screenshots? What are they drawing about the game? What are their fanfics? Like, what's going on?
They're drawing diagrams of nipple NFC and like how to use it. You lean in, don't bring the system to you. Set it down, lean over it.
They're in it for the end game. They already know how this is all going to pan out for them.
Yeah.
I do have probably one last Fragrant Story question that I'm not sure if you've been able to make it happen, but if you were able to give a copy yourself, either ship it or hand deliver it, the person can be alive or dead, who would you want to give a copy of this game to and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to think about that to give a real answer. Because most of the team members got a copy anyway. The rest of the team is going to get theirs same delay as everyone else. But yeah, I don't know. Can I give it? Ooh, here's a good answer. Mm-hmm. Can I give it to past me in a different parallel universe?
Are you gonna Bill and Ted yourself? You're gonna give it to yourself, and it'll come out 5 years earlier somehow.
Yeah. No, it's got to be a parallel. It would totally wreck everything. But just give it to past me and look at the reaction.
Would that be like a thing of horror, or would it be like almost like admiration?
I would be so happy.
I honestly, if I was you, I feel like if I gave me a game I had made, I almost wouldn't believe it, even if it was future me. I'm like, nah, I can't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like, nah, this isn't so real.
Even 1 year ago, this isn't what I was intending to do. It was less than a year ago that I pivoted and aggressively made Fragrant Story into a thing. So even giving it to me from exactly 1 year ago, I would have been like, what the hell is Fragrant Story? Is that my minigame? Why did this happen? What is it?
Little do you know, by giving it to yourself in the past, you butterfly affected it, and then it turns into an Oculus Quest exclusive.
Definitely, yeah.
They're like, hey, we heard you got a game about VR, we need some exclusives, what do you think?
I can't say anything more about Oculus. That's NDA.
That's okay.
I'm not going to touch that.
Hey, clearly the headsets in Fragrant Story, those are virtual boys. I will accept no other answer.
That's right.
But yeah, like to kind of start wrapping up or look at a little bit more ahead into the future for it, like, obviously you still have a ton of other work left for this, and you're still working on other projects, but like, for anyone out there who is interested, what else do you kind of have in the dev pipeline? You're still working on, obviously, Otosan, 6th Engine. What's like kind of in the near future? What are some things you're hoping to accomplish? Like, what do you want people looking forward to? What's next from you?
Yeah, so the next thing will be Otosan. That comes after Fragrant Story. That was supposed to come first, but this pivot sort of pushed it. But yeah, Otosan is next, and the way that I design the engine, I build features for 6th Engine content as they're needed in Otosan. So I sort of end up developing both at the same time. So my hope is that I can kind of sneak in a second scenario of 6th Engine while I'm developing Otosan. So those will be next, and then Cosmo Break is in the distant future, although it is getting aggressively developed behind the scenes. I'm just trying to stay tight-lipped, and I want to approach it this way for Otosan and Cosmo Break, is just kind of shut up about it, and then when it's ready, then I can show everyone. And that's unusual, I think, in the gaming sphere and the indie dev sphere, but it's how I like to do it, so just be patient. And if people want to know more, they can message me. I'll happily give you some updates, but I'm just not going to talk about it much publicly.
Yeah, and for like the for anyone out there who may just be listening to this, while Fragrant is obviously SRPG, you can kind of look at a screenshot and know like, oh, it plays like this, or it looks like one of these kind of games. What would you sort of say is the comparison for the other three of like Otosan, 6th Engine, and Cosmo Break in terms of, they look like obviously pixel art games and stuff for it, but like in terms of comparing them to other games, does any easy comparison kind of come to mind for the three for you?
Sure, yeah, and I'm glad you asked. That's kind of where I was headed next. Is Otosan is, well, they're all JRPGs. So Otosan, 6th Engine, and Cosmo Break are all more of a straight-up JRPG, instead of Fragrant Story being like the tactics style things. So these are just regular RPGs. And Otosan is closest to Earthbound. It's modern times, baseball bat, look for treasure in the school or whatever. 6th Engine is closest to Final Fantasy VI, obviously. It's these are both freeware. So 6th Engine is locked behind a login. You can just ask me for a login, but that's out of respect for Nintendo and Square Enix because it's a fan game. So I thought that was the best approach, is just don't have it public, don't talk about it. If people want to play, you
don't want to be that meme of inspired by X IP that they don't own article comes up 24 hours later, cease and desist letter.
Yeah, exactly. So if people want to check it out, just contact me and they can play it privately. So yeah, 6th Engine is close to Final Fantasy VI, and then Cosmo Break in the distant future, that's the big one. That's close to Chrono Trigger. And I have some really cool guests helping with that I can't talk about yet, but I'm really excited about it, but I'm going to be tight-lipped, so...
I'll try and get at least one juicy interview question out of you for Cosmo Break. Will it run at a higher or lower frame rate than the Chrono Cross remaster?
Oh, no. I love everyone. I love Nintendo. I love Square Enix. I have admiration and respect. That's my PC answer.
That's okay. I just especially because of the Chrono comparison for it. I was like, hey man, I was in the camp of, listen, it runs at 15 frames, but you know what? It runs in a way I can legally buy it. That's all I need. They could have handed me like the worst version of Chrono Cross, and I would have still been happy with it, because it's like, hey, I'm paying Square money for Chrono. I'm happy with that. I'm a very simple man.
Yeah, and I just imagining being a dev trying to port or re-release, that's heavy. It's heavy like Unity, like we were discussing Unity earlier. It's just, there's a lot of bloat that the devs, I'm sure, worked hard to mitigate.
It's got to be tough, because I think they released a lot of those other PS1 games with no problem, but like for them, the ones that people are mostly playing, like FF7, that had a PC port, which made things infinitely easier to bring to other consoles and have modern assets, where FF8 was a weird one because that got remastered similarly to this one. But yeah, like 9 getting one was weird. Cross coming out was weird. And I'm sure, I always find it funny, people are like, why haven't they released Chrono Trigger? And it's like, I'm sure, much like they've found out over the last year of, like, all the patches, like, I would love, like, a documentary one day about what a monstrous task that Pixel Remaster was, just on mobile and PC for 1 through 6. So, like, I can't even imagine what they're going to have to try and go through to get Trigger the way they probably want to sell it. because it's like that thing of like, just because it's on PC, like, listen, you're playing a phone app, really. Like, it doesn't feel like you're like playing it really. So like, and especially with something like that, it has that lineage. It's also like, God, what version are you gonna do? Like, are you just gonna bring over the DS version? Well, you can't just like copy and paste a DS game and expect it to look good and play good. So there are so many different little factors like that. I'm usually, for the remasters like that, assuming it's not like ones that get dumped out all the time. I'm gonna be a little harsher on Sonic because hey, he's had experience in terms of the re-release block, whereas like a lot of these more obscure, like if we got the worst port of Vagrant Story next year, it looks worse than a PS1, I would still be happy at the end of the day they thought someone cared enough to re-release that. Like, that's where I would be with it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's tough. You picture like something like Chrono Trigger that's had a number of re-releases and ports. Which code base are you gonna? Let's put it on the Switch. Okay, are we gonna start with the DS version? Are we gonna start with the PC version? And then what policies has Nintendo changed since then? Do you have to do autosave in a way that's incompatible with Chrono Trigger as we know it? So there's all those little X factors that my heart goes out to devs when people are screaming at them, why does this suck so much? And, oh my God, the frame rate is terrible. And I'm just, those poor devs. They did not want that. And they're sorry. Everyone's sorry.
That's why you gotta love the over explanation of why situations are bad are some of my favorite, because like I whenever I see like a mess for a development process, I don't like get mad. I always be like, I want to know what happened. How did we get here? What was the like? Because in most cases, it's probably something dumb and like one person knew about it.
Yeah, or worse, it's just some corporate top dog just yelling a requirement into existence.
Shinji Hashimoto just yelling, we got a crunch to get that Chrono Cross remaster out, guys. If it's not making our April, we got to make up for those Project Triangle strategy sales. Come on.
Or they're like you can only do one patch, and you can pick a quarter. And that's what you do your
honestly,
patch.
man.
So they're like, crap, we got some day one bugs we want to fix, but we don't want to use up our patch on that, so we got to just.
That is honestly, that is a real policy with first party Square stuff. They don't like their stuff to have to be patched a lot. I remember with Final Fantasy VII Remake, they almost were proud of the fact that game got patched twice on PS4, which is crazy. Like, they had one day one patch that like. No, sorry, there wasn't even a day one patch. There was going to be a day one patch, but then they delayed it for like what ended up being quarantine shipping reasons. They had like one patch like 6 or 9 months later, and like for the most part, like that was a very well put together game. Like, I remember my only bug I had with that game, which was crazy in retrospect of how technically ambitious it was I had one instance in the Shinra building, if I would look at a bathroom stall, the game would break every time. And I'm like, that, and it was so funny of like, if I was in the air vents and I looked at this one bathroom stall, the game would hard crash. And I was like, that is so funny that like that was the only bug I had in this like $200 million game.
Yeah, that's like kind of an endearing experience. That's cute. This stall, huh? And it's like it's some dev put in a failsafe to just crash everything before showing something that would bust their ESRB rating or something. So that's what's happening behind the wall. They're like, we can't be sure that the opacity is right, and somebody might see something. Well, why is there a nude model in that? No, never mind that. It's there. We can't change it. We have to put this failsafe in. If I
looked at it any longer, it would have just turned into shirtless Sephiroth for sure. That's all it would have been.
See, there you are, bringing it back to nipple NFC, right?
That's what the N stands for. The double NFC.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I have barely scratched the surface for all the questions and things I wanted to talk to you about, but unfortunately, I gotta try and wrap us up because I cannot believe we're at almost an hour and we're over an hour 40, which is very surprising to me. So
it's getting to be that time.
I am sure
really
at
fun.
some point I will sell a kidney or something in your direction that will have us get you back on because I have a bajillion other questions I have for you, let alone about. Everything else you're working on, but I want to thank you, Will, so much for coming on and just kind of chatting with me and all of us about everything.
Oh yeah, it's been really fun. Thanks for hanging out with me and giving me a break from the assembly line a little bit.
Yeah, and all the links for your stuff will be in the description below, but just in case for anyone out there who's very lazy but will listen and type things in on their own, where do you want people to find you?
So any of the brands should work. I put like this. I connected everything at the top of every website. So if you look for Fragrant Story, you go to fragrantstory.com. You can get to me from there. You can get to Squire Games from there. And likewise, if you look me up, William Kage, I have some extra resources on my site, like music making help and stuff. But WilliamKage.com, any of these places, they all link to each other at the top. So WilliamKage.com, SquireGames.com, FragrantStory.com. They're all good.
Awesome. Hopefully, at the very least, people can go if they enjoy the game. That's bonus points. If you guys want to donate to the Patreon, that's even more bonus points. If for some reason you liked this, we've also got a Patreon. Thanks to all of our Patreon producers. You guys will get a little edited shout out at the end here because I do not ever want to make my guests suffer through the process of me looking up who my current Patreon supporters are. Because God forbid I be that on the ball. But yeah, Will, thank you so much for listening. It was thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for talking and listening to me. I guess that's its own thing I had to thank you for putting up with. But it was awesome getting to chat with you, and hopefully everyone enjoys and learned a thing or two about how the sausage was made.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks to everybody for listening, and thanks for being a great host.
All right, see ya.